Well, hot damn, can't believe I currently got 23 subscribers. I'd just like to say thank you to the 27.7% viewers that are subscribed, and for the rest of you, it's really not that hard pressing the subscribe button. With that out of the way, we return to my current and favorite PRXMHA story, Samurai Forever. A couple of things I should mention before we start the video. First of all, rip Benny Potter, aka Comicstorian. Haven't watched the channel due to personal reasons, but I always loved his Deadpool videos. Not many people can do what he does. I'm pretty sure that most of the YouTubers who dub comics were inspired by you. So Benny, if you're watching this from the grave, just know that I'm going to find a way to get you a DP comic and some cold ones. So wait for us, man, because there are still viewers who want to read comics and chill. Rest in power, Comicstorian. Secondly, the actual name of this story is called MHA, Heroes and Samurai, made by the Casual Oddity. So please, for me and his followers, support him to continue writing the story, because they haven't updated the story since the 8th of December 2023. The story stops at chapter 11. Samurai Forever, Part 2 Act 4, A Meeting of the Pros. Can we just begin this pointless meeting already? Endeavor growled. He and several other pro heroes had been called to a meeting by the Hero Public Safety Commission. The meeting hadn't even started yet and he'd already been sitting there for 10 minutes. Calm down, Endeavor, the president of the HPSC replied. We need everyone here before we can begin. She looked around the boardroom at the other heroes at the table. Kamui Woods, Death Arms, Ingenium, Manual, Mount Lady, Gunhead, Power Loader, Mandalay, Edgeshot, Best Jeanist and Hawks. Also sitting at the table was the detective Naomasa Tsukachi. We're just waiting for 2 more heroes before we can begin. Not 10 seconds after she said that, the door to the boardroom opened and the hero Eraserhead walked through. Sorry, my class ran late and after that I ran into some villains on the way here, the underground hero said, taking a seat. Great, Hawks said as he leaned back in his chair. Now all we're waiting for is the big guy to show up. 10 minutes later, All Might arrived, bursting through the boardroom door. I am here, for this meeting, he bellowed before taking the last seat. It's about time you showed up, you're 20 minutes late, Endeavor grumbled. What kept you so busy? Endeavor please, the HPSC president was about to continue when All Might interrupted. No, it's fine, he has the right to ask, All Might told the president before turning to Flame Hero. I had to deal with villains on my way here. All Might answered. Truth was he was training with Mirio on how to better control One for All and lost track of time. Well then, can we finally get on to what this meeting's about? Endeavor impatiently asked. Certainly, the HPSC president said, pushing a button that activated a hologram in the middle of the table. The image projected was of the masked vigilante that had surfaced a few months ago that dubbed himself as the Red Samurai Ranger. Most of the heroes reacted neutrally while a small group glared at the figure in annoyance. A key example was Endeavor, who scowled in rage at the sight of the vigilante. 3 months ago, there was an incident at Tatooine Station where creatures identified as Mughas. The hologram changed from the masked vigilante to one of the creatures, appeared and began attacking civilians. Where the hell did those things come from? Eraserhead leaned forward to get a better look at the creature. While it's unknown where exactly they come from, eyewitness reports from later incidents gathered by Tsukachi stated that they came out glowing cracks or gaps. The hologram changed to a video. It showed a group of teens joking around when a crack in the wall behind them began glowing a bright red. A moment later, a hand of one of the creatures reached out before the video suddenly cut to black. What exactly are these things? Couldn't you get a forensics team to dissect one of these things? Gunhead asked. We had planned on retrieving one of the deceased Mughas to study, the HPSC president explained. However, the hologram then changed to bodycam footage that showed a couple of police officers trying to place a dead Mugha into a body bag. They got halfway until the corpse began turning to stone, then disintegrated. All attempts to attain one have failed as well, the HPSC president said, switching off the video. Whoever made these things really doesn't want anybody finding out how these things tick, Edgeshot remarked. The HPSC president nodded before turning to 3 of the heroes, Kamui Woods, Death Arms and Ingenium. You 3 were the first on the scene. Was there any other information that you received? Nothing that's not already known, Kamui Woods said before turning to Mount Lady. You usually survey that area too. Where were you? Oh, I was busy. My agency was holding a finance meeting because she accidentally destroyed her office again, the HPSC interrupted as she pulled up a new video, this one showing the 3 heroes battling the Mughas at the station. Now I'm kinda glad I was stuck in that finance meeting, Mount Lady thought as she saw the Mughas begin overpowering the heroes. The video continued on, showing the Turbo Hero about to be killed when a small object stopped the Mughas' strike. The camera began following the object as it flew around, hitting several Mughas before flying back to the station's entrance where a group of figures in black held up white banners and flags. Hey, don't they look like Kesagiriman? Manual pointed out the similar appearance of the Pro Hero and the black figures. We contacted him after the incident. He claimed to have no connections with them, the HPSC president replied. The video then showed the black figures pulling back the banners to reveal the vigilante. Gotta give them credit, Hawks said, leaning forward. This is a really impressive debut, much more impressive than a lot of pro heroes even. Whoever they are, they have an impressive budget, Best Jeanist commented. Not only with those groupies, but that's a pretty sleek outfit for a vigilante. Can we stop complimenting the criminal? Endeavor grunted. The heroes turned their attention back to the video as the vigilante began fighting off the Muggers one by one. So, this guy doesn't intend on letting those things live, Eraserhead thought to himself as the footage showed the vigilante striking down several of the Muggers. Meanwhile, Mandalay stared at the footage attentively, catching the HPSC president's attention. Mandalay, did you notice something? They seem like they've been training to fight them, Mandalay said. I think they knew these things were coming. The heroes began thinking about that statement. Did they know these things were coming? Why didn't they inform the authorities? Would they have even believed them? How much does this guy know about these things? They turned their attention back to the hologram only for the video to then cut out when one of the Muggers charged at the person behind the camera. That footage was recorded by a student named Mina Rashido, Naomasa stated. After the incident, she told the police that she and her friend Eijiro Karashima got trapped by a group of Muggers. She said that she thought they were gonna die until the Red Samurai Ranger saved them. She said that he reassured them that they'd be safe. So they're not doing this for fame then. That's good. Everybody turned to All Might. That's good. Are you endorsing this unlicensed punk's actions? Endeavor shouted. Don't get me wrong, I'm not endorsing his actions. I'm just thankful he's doing this to help people and not for becoming a celebrity, All Might clarified. I agree, Ingenium said, siding with the #1 hero. Be that as it may, we can't let this vigilante run around without supervision by the Hero Association, the HPSC president said before pulling up another video. This video was taken at a construction site. It showed the Red Samurai Ranger keeping the construction workers safe while fighting off the Muggers. The HPSC paused it when the vigilante sent out the flying object. What is that? Power Loader leaned forward to get a better look at the object. It appeared to be a small mechanical lion. Fascinating. Whoever they are, they must have either bought that off the black market or built it by themselves. The HPSC president fast-forwarded to when the vigilante attached something to their blade's hilt and launched an attack. Blazing strike. A wave of fire flew from their sword and hit several Muggers. So does he have a fire quirk? Mount Lady questioned. Maybe, but I don't think so, Death Arms replied, pointing to the object attached to their sword. I think that's how they're controlling the flames. He turned his attention back to the video when the vigilante pulled out a device and wrote out the kanji for Bind, Fu, and launched it at a group of Muggers, a ring of fire forming and trapping them together. That's gotta be their quirk. We thought that too, the HPSC president said, bringing up a list. We searched for quirks similar to that. The one closest to it was a quirk named Scriptomancy, but the quirk's user was an old bedridden man, so we have our doubts that it's him. The hologram then began playing footage from other incidents, one on the freeway, another in a back alley, one nearby a high school and lastly one under a bridge. To conclude, the HPSC president stood up. Even though this Red Samurai Ranger is fighting the Muggers to protect people, we can't allow them to run around without any form of supervision. He needs to be apprehended. With that, the meeting concluded as the heroes exited the boardroom, leaving the HPSC president to talk with Naomasa. Any new information from you or your colleagues? The HPSC president asked. The detective shook his head. We're still at square one. I don't have anything new and Tanuma is no help whatsoever. Damn, the HPSC president grimaced. Just then the detective's phone began buzzing. He pulled it out and immediately sighed when he saw the name on his phone screen. Oh great. Let me guess, Makota? The HPSC president asked, receiving a nod in response. She was certainly not a fan of the detective's younger sister. Not only was she the PR manager for that arrogant hero from America, but she also had ties to the Naruhata vigilantes from 5 years ago. Update me when you find any possible leads. The detective nodded before exiting the boardroom, leaving the HPSC president to glare at a projection of the vigilante. There you have it. It appears that the Hero Public Safety Commission aren't too happy with Izuka running around fighting off the Nylok. Act 5. The team unites Part 1 in one of the back alleys of Musutafu. A hand reached out of the gap between the wall and a dumpster. A Muga stepped out into the human world, followed by many more. The horde stood there. They began to listen for signs of life, and when they heard it, they began marching only to find something in their way. In the entrance of the alleyway, stood two of the Kuruko, the aides of the Samurai Rangers, holding the white flags with the Shiba family crest on them. Then a red figure walked into the alleyway. It was the current Red Samurai Ranger. Couldn't you guys have shown up at a better time? The Ranger asked, yawning. It's 5 in the morning, he said before drawing his sword and charging at them. A couple of Mugas lunged at him with their swords, but the ranger blocked their attacks and struck him down. Another Muga jumped at him, but the ranger ducked under its attack before then sweeping its legs, knocking it to the ground before slashing at it. Another Muga lunged at the ranger, but he blocked the attack before pinning the Muga to the wall with his spin sword. He then turned to the other Mugas, elbowing one in the chest and roundhouse kicking a couple others in the face. The ranger retrieved his sword, then performed a 360-degree slash, finishing off those Mugas. He then ran back into the horde, striking down a few more. A group of 5 Mugas then surrounded him and all swung their swords. The ranger simply blocked their attack with his sword, threw a back kick at the Muga behind him and slashed at the other 4. 2 Mugas climbed onto the dumpster and jumped at the ranger while his back was turned. On instinct, the ranger spun around and slashed at the 2. The Mugas were sent back by the strike, hitting the dumpster before falling to the ground. He then blocked 2 more attacks before pulling out the Lion Fire spin disc. He threw it into the air before slamming his sword into it, handle first. He spun the disc and began slashing at the Mugas, taking them down one by one. The ranger then ended the battle by giving one last spin of the disc. Blazing Strike. He launched the attack and reduced the remaining Mugas to ashes. After sheathing his sword, the ranger let out a breath before being alarmed by the sound of approaching sirens. "Oh shoot, we better get going," he said to the Kuroko before pulling out his samuraiza and writing out the kanji for gate, men, opening a portal to the Shiba house. "Fantastic work out there, young Midoriya," G exclaimed as the ranger and the 2 Kuroko walked through. "Those Mugas didn't stand a chance against you." "Thanks, mentor," Izuku yawned as he demorphed. "But I probably would have beaten him much faster if I wasn't so tired." One of the Kuroko walked up to the teen with a cup of coffee. "Thank you," Izuku said, taking it. "Maybe, but it's still impressive that you were able to fend them off. These past 5 months of training have really paid off," G said before pulling out his samuraiza. After searching through it, he began to chuckle. "What's so funny?" Izuku asked as he sipped the coffee. G showed it to Izuku. It was a picture from 5 months ago showing Izuku on the ground after getting hit by one of the Kuroko. One of the Kuroko took this. "Look how far you've come." Izuku looked down in embarrassment, only to start chuckling when he saw G's bunny slippers. Upon noticing this, G quickly changed the discussion. "So, have you gotten your results yet?" G asked. Izuku looked down at the floor in what seemed to be defeat, only to look up at G with a wide grin on his face. "You're looking at UA's newest General Studies course student. Well done, young Midoriya." G cheered for the teen's success. However, what he said took Izuku completely off guard. However, this is not the time for celebrating. With every Nightlock attack, more Mugas have begun to make their way through. It is only a matter of time before a wrathful Nightlock makes their way through. G took a deep breath before saying, "I think it's time that we summon the others." Others, the descendants of the other samurai rangers, others who have the capacity to use symbol power. Only together will you be able to defeat the Nightlock, G explained. Izuku thought about it for a moment before looking back at G. "No, I can handle the Nightlock by myself. I've been doing so for the past 4 months. After finishing the coffee, he handed it back to the Kuroko. "Thank you." He then turned back to G. "I gotta get back before my mum wakes up and sees I'm gone," Izuku said before creating a portal back to his bedroom and leaving. G began to think about Izuku's reaction. Why does he insist on doing this by himself? He thought before turning to one of the Kuroko. "You there? Check the records, it's time to prepare." Later in the netherworld, the tentacle-faced monster sat by the river, waiting for more Mugas to emerge, so he could send another horde to the human world. Then he heard something, the sound of someone playing a string instrument. "Is that?" He looked to the river to see a large ship emerge from it. "Ha, at long last." After swimming through the violent water, the monster made it onto the ship. "Ah, it's so good to be on board again." He then turned to the source of the music. It was a female Nightlock with hair covering where eyes would have been, while a pair of yellow ones sat high near the top of her head. "It's a pleasure to see you again, Dayu. I see you've not forgotten how to play your harmonium." Dayu threw a quick glance at him. "Good to see you too, Octaru." "So, where's the master?" Octaru asked. For a moment, Dayu stopped playing her harmonium before turning to Octaru. "He's in his quarters." Octaru looked at her for a second before walking to where Master Xandrid resided. As he peered into the room, Octaru saw him sitting on his throne. He was entirely stone, with his face trapped in a permanent scowl. "Curses," Octaru said as he walked back into the main room of the ship. "That red samurai ranger really took a toll on him. Good thing we managed to wipe them all out," Dayu responded as she continued to play her harmonium. "Yeah, about that. It seems that a few may have survived," Octaru informed his fellow Nightlock. Dayu's music ceased as she looked at Octaru. "That's gonna piss him off when he wakes up." "Definitely." Dayu then turned her attention to the shore, her eyes widening at the sight of a massive amount making its way out through the rocky ground. "Does that mean the seal has finally broken?" Octaru said as he walked to the bow of the ship, a purple glow emanating from his staff. "Although I would have preferred if it broke a century ago. It would have saved me a lot of boredom," he said before launching an energy blast out across the endless river. "So, who did you summon?" Dayu asked. Tuya, his tendency to destroy anything he comes across will definitely cause the Sanzu River to rise, Octoru explained. Aldera Junior High, how the hell did you get in? Katsuki slammed Izuku into the wall, letting off a few sparks. He was seething after learning that this useless piece of trash got into UA. I was supposed to be the only one in this shit school to get into UA, but no, you just had to get in the way of that. Let go of me, Izuku said as he grabbed Katsuki's wrist. Hey, what was that? The hell did you just say, stupid duh? He was thrown off guard when Izuku threw a punch, hitting him square in the jaw. What the hell? Katsuki said as he stumbled back. Enough, Izuku shouted back. It doesn't matter if you threaten me or not, I'm going to UA, there's nothing you can do to stop me. Izuku then began to walk off. This only angered Katsuki. Where the hell do you think you're going, D? I'm not a useless, Deku, Kaken, Izuku shouted back. Not anymore. Izuku finished before walking away, leaving Katsuki in stunned silence and anger. Later at the Shiba house, Izuku was still seething after his confrontation with Katsuki when he walked through the large wooden gate. There he saw G, walking out of the Shiba house with a bow and 4 arrows in the quiver on his back, each one with different colored feathers on the ends. Mentor, is this a part of today's training? Because I thought my weapon was a giant SWO. G interrupted the teen. I know you said that you could handle the Nylok on your own, but the fact of the matter is that the other rangers need to be summoned. G then walked forward, reaching for one of the arrows. Wait, Izuku rushed forward to stop G. I told you I can do this on my own, you don't have to summon them. Why are you being so stubborn about this? G asked. I can handle the Nylok, there's no reason to. Izuku was about to continue until G cut him off. It's because of Bakugu, isn't it? G asked, stunning Izuku. 80% of humanity has a quirk, so odds are that you'll be the only quirkless member. You fear that they'll be just like him, don't you? Izuku stood there in silence for a moment. No, it's not him, Izuku explained. It's just that, I don't want anyone else to get dragged into this and get hurt. I don't want anyone else risking their lives. G stared at him sympathetically. A noble reason, but I must disagree, G said as he aimed for the sky and began firing the arrows, one by one. A young blonde teen with a streak of black in his hair that resembled a lightning bolt walked through the street. He just got done with the school for today and decided to get some grub. He went to go buy a burger, then found a bench to eat at. This looks delicious, he thought when he sat down and unwrapped it. Itadakimasu. An arrow suddenly launched out of the sky and right through the teen's burger, ripping it out of his hands. The teen stared down at the arrow, his burger now skewered on it. Hey, whoever is practicing their archery, your arrow almost got stuck in my face, he shouted before leaning down to inspect the arrow and get his burger back. Upon inspection it looked like an old wooden arrow. The only thing notable about it was the feathers on the back were a bright green. Then he noticed something. In the middle of the arrow was a note with his name on it. Denki Kaminari, a young brunette girl, was on her way back to her apartment after school. Her parents were working late tonight because their rent unexpectedly got raised. As she got to the door, an arrow flew past her and into the wall. She jumped back in surprise as she looked out to see where it came from. She then looked back at the arrow and noticed two things. The feathers on the back were a bright pink and in the middle was a note with her name on it. Okako Uraraka, a girl with purple hair and earphone jacks attached to her ears, sat in her room playing her guitar. After a while she noticed that the room was getting a bit stuffy, so she went to open a window. As soon as she did, an arrow came through and landed on the floor. What the hell? She stumbled back as she tried to wrap her head around what just happened. She looked out the window to see where it came from before grabbing the arrow. The first thing she noticed was that the feathers on the back were a bright yellow. Upon a closer look, she noticed a note in the middle that had her name on it. Kyoka Jiru, a navy-haired teen with glasses and engines on his calves, was in the middle of his afternoon jog. He had recently gotten his acceptance letter from UA and was ready to become a pro hero, just like his brother. As he ran, he heard a noise come from behind. He turned around to see an arrow stuck in the ground. He then began looking around to see who fired it. Whoever fired this arrow, that was very irresponsible. If you're gonna practice your archery, then do so at a certified archery range. He then leaned down to look at the arrow. At first nothing looked odd other than the light blue feathers on the end, but after getting a closer look, he found a note with his name on it. Tenya Iida. He unwrapped the note to take a look at it. It only had one thing written on it. Gather, followed by a time and list of coordinates. G lowered his bow after firing all his arrows. It is done. He then ran back inside to the main room with Izuku not far behind. G slid the top of the table off, revealing a secret compartment. Inside sat 4 more samurais. They will arrive at noon tomorrow. G looked up at Izuku. Alone you are strong, but as a team, you'll be unbeatable. Izuku reluctantly nodded back. A day later, in the netherworld, Octoru and Dayu sat and waited as the Sanzu River began to grow more and more ravenous and violent. A blue hand grabbed onto the deck of the Nylok ship. At last, Tuya said as he climbed on board. His head, torso and shoulders were a deep red while the rest of his body was blue. His head resembled a samurai helmet but lacked eyes. Those however were located on his shoulders. His defining feature was an entire face on his lower half. Octoroo, it's good to see you again, Dayu. Glad to see you haven't changed. Harsh on the ears except when you're playing your harmonium. He greeted the two before he began to look around the ship. Say, where's the big man? In his quarters, all dried out, Octoroo explained. What? I came all the way here to celebrate our master's return and he's in a stone-cold coma, Tuya angrily shouted. Well, there is still a reason to celebrate, Octoroo said as he pointed to the shore where dozens of Mugas gathered. The seal is broken? Tuya asked. Octoroo nodded his head. Wait, does this mean you summoned me to be the first true Nylok to launch an attack on the human world? I'm honored, he said, pulling out a pair of twin swords. Trust me boss, I'll have those humans crying for mercy in no time, Tuya said before diving off the ship. Enthusiastic as always, Octoroo laughed as he watched Tuya swim through the violent river. Okako arrived at the opening to the forest that edged Musutafu. She looked down the corridor of trees that lead to the location on her phone. As she was about to enter, she heard a voice come from behind. Excuse me. She turned to see another teen. He was around her age with navy blue hair and glasses. Were you the one who fired this at me? He asked, holding up a similar arrow. Oh, no I'm not. I came here cause I got one as well, Okako said as she showed her arrow before introducing. Okako Uraraka. Ga, where are my manners? Tenya Iida. Tenya introduced himself. Hey, you guys got arrows too? The two looked over to see a purple-haired girl run over to them, arrow in hand. Yes, Tenya said as he showed his arrow. I'm Tenya Iida. Okako followed suit. I'm Okako Uraraka, Kyoka Jiru. The girl replied. So is the place through there? Kyoka asked as she pointed down the corridor of trees. Should be, Tenya replied. Great, now I can get some answers, Kyoka said as she began walking towards the opening. As the two joined her, a fourth voice began chasing after them. Hey, the three turned back to see a blonde teen running at them, waving another arrow in the air. You guys get shot at as well? Yes, Tenya stepped forward to greet him. I am Tenya Iida. Okako Uraraka, Kyoka Jiru, Denki Kaminari, Mighty Green, the teen said, showing the end of his arrow. After getting introductions out of the way, the four walked down the long rocky path. When they eventually reached the end, they saw a large wooden gate. Whoa, that's fancy, Okako said at the side of it. Looks like an album cover, Kyoka said, snapping a picture on her phone. As the four began to approach the gate, the sound of drums began playing as the four were suddenly surrounded by figures in black carrying white banners and flags. As the four looked to see that they were surrounded, the gate opened and a figure walked through. It was the vigilante that had been all over the news, the Red Samurai Ranger. I'm still not sure about this, the ranger thought as he approached the group. Are you the one who shot the arrows at us? Tenya asked, pointing his hand at the vigilante. Why yeah, that's correct, the ranger said. I brought you all here because I need your help. What do you mean? Kyoka asked. Centuries ago, monsters called Nylok invaded our world, hell-bent on bringing us to extinction, he explained. Thankfully, teams of samurai rangers like myself arose to battle them through the generations. Eventually they managed to send them back to where they came from. But now the Nylok have returned, so a new team of samurai rangers must unite to stop them. Wait, Denki cut in, so you're asking us to become your teammates? Yes, the ranger nodded. But why us? Okako asked. Shouldn't you be asking pro heroes to be a part of your team? Because you're like me, the ranger stepped forward. You are the descendants of the previous samurai rangers, meaning you have the capacity to utilize something called symbol power, he said before pulling out a device that resembled a flip phone crossed with a paintbrush and writing out the kanji for show, and sending it at the four. After a moment each of them began blowing the colors of the feathers on the end of their arrows. Symbol power isn't a quirk, but you probably won't have any trouble using it, the ranger explained before continuing. I'm gonna be honest, becoming a samurai ranger isn't easy. You gotta be ready to give up everything at any time to protect everyone you care about. I understand if you don't want to join. After a moment of silence, Kyoka stepped forward. A week ago, I enrolled in a hero school because putting yourself before others is the coolest thing you can do. It would be hypocritical of me to want to become a hero and not join you. Same here, Okako said, stepping forward as well. I'm joining too. Well, I'm in, Denki said, stepping forward. What are you people thinking? Tenya shouted at the others. How could you go along with this irresponsible vigilante's nonsense? If the Nylok are such a big threat, then he should have informed the proper authorities. Tenya then turned his attention to the vigilante. You're only fighting them to take all the attention for yourself and away from the actual pro heroes, aren't you? It's not like that. I'm not fighting the Nylok to be famous. I'm fighting them because I want to help people. The ranger responded. I wanted to be a pro hero, but it's just that, I can't. So when I learned about the Nylok, I couldn't just stand idly by, so please, trust me. Tenya stared back at the vigilante. Why can't you become a hero? The ranger took a moment before saying, because I am quirkless. The ranger was then enveloped in a bright red light, which after fading, revealed a young teen around their age with messy green hair and freckles. "Huh, I thought he'd be taller," Denki said after seeing the ranger's identity. "L, look, you don't need to join B, but I just didn't want you to think I was just in this for being some pompous celebrity. I just want to protect everyone I can," the teen explained himself. Tenya thought to himself for a moment, "I do not approve of your vigilante actions." The green-haired teen nodded. However, Tenya continued, "If I could prevent innocent people from getting hurt, but instead stood idly by, I'd bring shame to the Iida family name, so I'll join you in your fight." The teen turned back to the other three. "Are you guys still in?" "Hell yeah," Denki said while the other two nodded. "Well, if you're gonna join, then you'll need your samurais," the teen said as one of the black figures walked over to the teens, holding a small black box. The teen opened the box and revealed 4 more flip phones. The other 4 walked forward, each taking a samurai for themselves. "You know, if we're gonna be a team," Kyoka began, "we should probably know who's leading us into battle." The teen smiled back at his teammates. "Azuku Midoriya, let's get to training." Downtown MUSUTAFU, a blue hand reached out from a crack in the ground. Tuya emerged through the crack, followed by hordes of Mugas. "All right Mugas, it's time to show these pathetic humans real fear," Tuya shouted. The Mugas immediately started running at civilians while Tuya marched forward, slashing at cars he walked past. The 5 walked through the gate of the Shiba house and into the courtyard. "Whoa, this place is big," Kyoka said, looking up at the main building. "And fancy," Okako gawked as she looked around. Denki spotted the training grounds with a few weapons holstered nearby. He ran over to grab one of the training swords. "On guard," he said as he began waving it around. "Put that back where you found it. You could poke someone's eye out with your idiocy," Iida yelled at the electric blonde. "Ah, I see that you're ready to begin your training." The 4 looked over to see an old man in gold and brown robes, walking out of the main building. "That's G Kusakabe," Azuku introduced his mentor to the others. "He's the one who trained me to become a samurai ranger." G walked towards the 4 newcomers. "Now it's time for me to train you to become samurai rangers as well." He then turned his attention to Denki. "It seems that you're eager to begin combat training." "Oh, yeah," Denki replied. G chuckled. "Very well then." He then turned to Azuku. "Young Midoriya, warm him up." Azuku nodded and walked over to grab a training sword and turned to face his new teammate. Azuku got into a proper combat stance while Denki got into a similar stance but began waving his sword like a baseball bat. "Is that Hasa no Kami?" G thought as he looked at the blonde's stance. Denki charged at Azuku, swinging his sword at him. Azuku blocked his attacks before thrusting his sword at Denki's chest. After a breather, the 2 resumed training when the 2 ran back at each other. This time Denki thrusted his sword directly at Azuku's head. Azuku ducked under the attack and slammed his sword into Denki's gut, knocking him to the ground. "Hey, are you alright?" Azuku asked, offering him a hand. "Yeah, I'm fine, thanks," Denki said, taking Azuku's hand and getting back to his feet. After another quick breather, Denki ran at Azuku and swung at him with his sword. Azuku dodged the attack and then used his sword to sweep Denki's legs, causing him to fall to the ground. "Seems your training will take more time than I anticipated," G said as the blonde began getting back to his feet. Before real training could begin however, the alarm began blaring from the Shiba house. G and Azuku immediately ran inside the building, the other not far behind. When they got to the main room, G slammed his hand on the table to bring up the map. "What's the situation?" Azuku asked. "Downtown Musutafu, and it's not just Mugas this time. A wrathful Nylok has emerged as well," G informed the teens. "Well crap, what do we do?" Kyoka asked. G and Azuku looked back at the 4. After a moment to think, G grabbed his samurai and wrote the kanji for instinct, Benneng. He then cast it at the 4. "Why do my limbs feel tingly?" Denki asked. "The symbol I casted will allow you to temporarily combat the Nylok until you can get the proper training," G explained before writing the kanji for gate, men, creating a portal to downtown Musutafu. "Good luck." "You guys ready?" Azuku asked, getting unsure nods from the 4. After a moment, the 5 ran through, followed closely behind by the Kuroko. Tuya marched through the streets, continuing his path of destruction while the Mugas attacked fleeing civilians. "Ah, look at them run. This'll surely raise the Sanzu River," Tuya remarked, causing more and more damage to the area. Then he heard something. He turned to see 2 figures standing at the top of a set of stairs. At first he thought it was the Rangers. Finally, "About time you, wait a minute, you're not the Rangers." One of the figures wore a green cape with a black and white mask. "This is your only warning. Return to where you came from and never return," they shouted. The other hero had white hair, rabbit ears and wore a white leotard that had a moon on it. "Or else we're gonna kick your ass," the other figure shouted. After a moment, the monster began laughing. "Ha ha ha, you think you can convince me to just leave?" It then pointed its sword at the duo. "Mugas, charge!" "Mirako, you take the Mugas, I'll take him," the green-caped figure said. You got it, Crust, Mirako shouted as the two heroes charged at the Mugas. Mirako began attacking the Mugas, jumping around and kicking them one by one, creating a clear path for Crust to battle this new monster. Crust created a shield and threw it at them, hitting Tuya in the head. Tuya reached where the shield hit. He then pointed his sword at the hero. Mugas attack. The Mugas surrounded the hero, slashing and thrusting their swords at him. The hero created a pair of shields, managing to protect himself from their attacks. He then began throwing his shields at them, knocking a few of them back. Tuya raised his sword when Crust turned his back to him. He then thrusted his sword at the hero, but Crust spotted the attack out of the corner of his eye and created a shield to stop the attack. You're pretty strong for a human, I'll give you that, Tuya said before repeatedly striking the shield, over and over, eventually cutting into the hero's arm. Ak shouted in pain before being grabbed by the neck. Tuya then threw the hero into the stairs they arrived on, cracking them on impact. Oh crap, Crust, Mirako shouted, starting to get overwhelmed by the Mugas. Crust tried to get back up, only for a blue foot to slam down on his chest. Maybe they confused one of you costumed fools for one of the rangers, Tuya remarked. Crust's eyes widened as Tuya raised his sword, ready to finish off the hero, only to be distracted by something. The sounds of drums began growing closer. Tuya looked up at the top of the stairs to see the Kuroko, the aides of the samurai rangers, holding the white banners and flags that signaled their arrival. It's about time. We're here, Izuku said. After a while of running, they had reached downtown Musutafu. You ready? Oh yeah, Denki wheezed. We just need a bit of a breather. Kyoko finished the blonde's sentence. While Izuku and Tenya were fine, the other three weren't really prepared for all the running. Also, I gotta ask, is it necessary to shout, "Go go samurai," at the top of our lungs? He said it's tradition to use it as a battle cry, Tenya argued back. I kinda like it, Okako added. After catching their breath, the group stood side by side. Samuraizers, Izuku shouted. All five pulled out their samuraizers and converted them into their brush mode. Go go samurai, the five shouted, writing out their respective elemental kanji and morphing. The Kuroko then pulled back the banners to reveal the rangers. Izuku morphed into his ranger form. He pulled a black disc out of his belt buckle and put it on his sword. He then unsheathed his sword and rested it on his shoulder. Red Samurai Ranger, ready. Tenya morphed into a blue ranger form with the kanji for water, Shui, as his visor. He followed suit, unsheathing his sword before striking a battle pose. Blue Samurai Ranger, ready. Okako morphed into a pink ranger form with the kanji for heavens, Chan, as her visor. She unsheathed her sword and rested it on her shoulder. Pink Samurai Ranger, ready. Denki morphed into a green ranger form with the kanji for tree, Mu, as his visor. He unsheathed his sword, nonchalantly running his thumb on the edge of the blade. Green Samurai Ranger, ready. Kyoko morphed into a yellow ranger form with the kanji for soil, too, as her visor. She unsheathed her sword and held it up to eye level. Yellow Samurai Ranger, ready. The five got into battle poses before shouting, "Rangers together, samurai forever." Tuya pointed his sword towards the rangers. Mugas charge, he said before going back to treating Crust like a ragdoll. The rangers ran down the stairs, ready to combat the Mugas. Izuku charged in, going with a more aggressive approach, slashing at the Mugas as he moved forward. Meanwhile, Tenya and Kyoka fought with a more mixed style, using a balance between aggressive and defensive techniques. Then there was Okako, who used a more defensive style, mostly blocking the Muga's attack, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Finally, there was Denki, whose fighting style mostly consisted of blocking attacks and running for his life. This eventually led him to being backed into a corner. He began looking around for a solution until his eyes landed on his sword. Wait, I can use this thing as a lightning rod to direct my quirk. Denki smirked under his helmet as he pointed his sword at them. Hope you guys are ready for a few million volts. He prepared to discharge his electricity when nothing happened. Both he and the Mugas paused at the lackluster result. A few million volts. Denki tried the attack again, only for the same result. He looked at his arm to see the faint glow of electricity crackling under the suit. What the hell? He looked back up in time to dodge out of the way of an attack. Meanwhile, Tenya ran into a crowd of Mugas, blocking attacks launched at him and striking back. He then prepared to launch a kick, backed up by a recipro burst from his engines. But when he went for it, his leg was suddenly pulled back. What's going on? Tenya said, blocking another Muga's attack. Okako got caught up in a group, desperately blocking the Muga's attacks. She attempted to use her quirk to make some of them float using her zero-gravity quirk, slamming her open palm into one of the Muga's chests, but all that seemed to do was tick it off. It lunged at her, but Okako managed to retreat and regroup with the other rangers. I can't use my quirk. It's the suits, Kyoka said. The other rangers all turned to her. They are blocking the parts of our body that our quirks come from, she said, tapping the side of her helmet. And if it's not it, then whatever these things are made out of is keeping us from using our quirks effectively. Oh great, so we're basically fighting quirkless, Denki said, only to immediately regret it when Izuku looked at him. No offense. None taken, Izuku said before turning back to face the Mugas. Hordes of Mugas began charging at the Rangers. We're surrounded, Okako said, blocking another Muga's attack. There's too many of them, Tenya said, slashing at another Muga. How are we supposed to fight them off? Don't worry, I'll thin out their numbers, Izuku said, spinning the black disc on his spin sword. In seconds, it morphed into a large sword with the kanji for fire, Huo, on the end of it. He then pulled out the lion fire spin disc and attached it to the weapon. Fire Smasher. Izuku then ran into the crowd, swinging it at the Mugas and launching them into the air like they were nothing. The other Rangers stared wide-eyed at Izuku's new weapon. Wait, does that mean we got our own weapons too? Denki said, looking down at his sword. We should probably wait until we get actual training, Tenya said, lowering Denki's sword before turning back to the others. Right now we need a plan on how to deal with the remaining Mugas. After a moment of thinking, Kyuka spoke up. I got it, we'll fight in pairs. The others listened in. Me and Kami, she stopped talking and looked around, spotting Mirako nearby. Me and Green will fight some of them and Blue and Pink will deal with the others. Right, the Rangers agreed before running off to battle. Tenya and Okako fought back to back, with her blocking the Muga's attacks and him striking the finishing blows. One Muga, however, managed to slip past Tenya and went to attack Okako. Behind you, he shouted, blocking the Muga's attack. Okako looked back after blocking a Muga's attack. She then slashed at both of them. Thanks for the save. No problem, Tenya said before turning around and slashing at a Muga that was about to attack. Meanwhile, Kyoka had been striking down several Mugas while Denki acted as more of a distraction, though still managing to take a couple out. Mind if I cut in? He said as he slashed at one. Kyoka struck down two Mugas before processing what Denki said. Was that a pun? What? It's my way of dealing with dangerous situations. Well, that and running, he said before turning back around just in time to duck under a Muga's attack, allowing Kyoka to finish it off. Crust hit a concrete pillar with a sickening thud after being thrown through the air by Tuya. Ah, come on, don't have any fight left in ya. Crust began throwing shield after shield at the Nylok, but it didn't have any effect. Thought not, such a shame. You gave me an interesting battle, but now it's time for you to die, he said, raising his sword. But he stopped when he heard footsteps. He turned to see the Red Ranger running at him, now equipped with the fire smashed. Ugh, I'll deal with you after. Might give you enough time to plan one last grand attack before I kill you, Tuya said as he stared down the Ranger. Take this, he shouted, firing a couple of energy blasts from his swords at him. Izuku shielded himself using his fire smasher. He then lifted it up above his head and brought it down on the Nylok. Tuya managed to block it with his swords but wasn't prepared when the Ranger swung his weapon back around and slammed it into him, launching him through the air until he slammed onto the roof of a car, caving it in and shattering the windshield. Are you alright? Izuku spun around to check with the injured hero, who weakly nodded. I'm not finished yet. Izuku spun back around to see Tuya launch a car at the two. Izuku raised his sword high and cut the vehicle in two. He then charged at Tuya, knocking the swords out of the Nylok's hands before ramming him with the fire smasher and pinning him to a concrete pillar. Izuku ended the battle by performing a 360-degree slash, cutting through both Tuya and the pillar. Gah! Tuya cried out before blowing up in a fiery explosion. Izuku's spin sword returned to normal as he resheathed it then ran to help the injured pro hero. You okay? He asked as he helped Crust to his feet. Why yeah, thanks, Crust said, barely able to stand. Crust, Mirako hopped over. After making sure that he wasn't critically injured, she turned to face the Red Ranger. I gotta admit Red, you're pretty tough. I've got no idea why you decided to team up with these sad sacks, she said, right as the other Rangers arrived after dealing with the Mugas. Gee, thanks, Kyoka deadpanned. We should probably get going. The battle's over, right? Okako asked. No, Izuku said, turning back to where he defeated Tuya. The wrathful Nylok have two forms, you guys just saw the first. Before they could ask what he meant, a shout caught them by surprise. Freeze! The Rangers looked around to see the police surrounding them. Guns at the ready. Don't move, we have you completely surrounded. Wait, seriously, Denki shouted. We took care of that monster and this is how you guys repay us. Well, technically, he was the one who dealt with that monster. Mirako pointed to Izuku. As Denki complained more at the pro hero's comment, Tenya turned to Izuku. What should we do, sir? Should we retreat? No, get ready, Izuku warned. Here comes the mega monster. It was then that a towering inferno emerged from where Izuku had defeated the Nylok. Tuya then emerged from the fire, now 50 meters tall. Now I'm gonna crush you all. The group barely managed to jump out of the way as the Nylok's giant foot slammed on the ground. They all looked up to see the police scattering as Tuya walked off, ready to cause some major collateral damage. How the hell are we supposed to fight that? Kyoka yelled. Mount Lady can handle him, right? Okako asked. Are you kidding? That guy's like 3 times taller than her, Denki shouted back. Izuku stared at the giant Nylok before turning to the two pro heroes. We'll handle him while you begin evacuation procedures. This resulted in confused looks from both the heroes and the other Rangers. Wait, what? Are you still planning on fighting the thing? Mirako asked. Even she knew when to pick her battles. Hell, do you have anything to beat it with? Yes, we do. Izuku confirmed. Okay then, Crust said as he and Mirako rushed to help with evacuation efforts. Izuku then turned back to the other Rangers. Well, what do we do now? Tenya asked. We'll beat him using these. Izuku said as he pulled out a small pentagonal box which then transformed the lion folding Zord. The Rangers then turned to see a pair of Kuroko running over the Rangers holding a box. Inside were 4 new Zords, a hexagonal Zord for Tenya, a circular Zord for Okako, a square Zord for Denki and a triangular Zord for Kyuka. Izuku then pulled out his Samurazer and wrote out the kanji for Awaken, and cast it on the 4 remaining Zords. The hexagonal Zord unfolded into 4 segments to form the main body and tail. The head and neck then folded out of one of the ends, the dragon folding Zord. The circular Zord had 2 small fins folded out from the bottom, the head then popping out, the turtle folding Zord. The square Zord had 2 legs folding out from each side before one half of it shifted down, the head then folded out of the front, the bear folding Zord. Finally, the triangular Zord unfolded into 2 segments. One of the segments then also unfolded to form the Zord's arms whilst revealing the head, the ape folding Zord. The Zords then leapt from the box to their owners, the dragon and turtle flying through the air while the ape and bear ran across the ground. What are we supposed to do with these? Denki asked as he reached down for his Zord. Upon hearing the Green Ranger's question, the lion Zord folded back into its emblem mode. Izuku knelt down and placed the Zord on the ground. He then used his Samurazer and wrote the kanji for Big Da, and cast it on the Zord. Within seconds the Zord grew to a massive size, towering over the other Rangers. Oh, so that's what we do with these? Denki said, his eyes widening as he stared up at the massive Zord. Izuku was then transported to the Zord's cockpit. At the center stood a podium that had red sections as well as a glowing red pentagon on the front. Behind it stood a golden shoji screen with scrolls on it that had the kanji for lion, shizi, on them. Izuku's outfit had changed, now an armored form instead of the spandex. His sword also changed, now a black mechanical blade with the spin disc placed on its side. Izuku folded it up into a control stick and plugged it into the podium. Charge! Izuku shouted as he moved the blade forward, the lion Zord following his command. Meanwhile back on the ground, Tenya was the first to come out of his stupor. Come on, let's join him, he said, pulling out his Samurazer. The others joined him, writing out the kanji and enlarging their Zords. When they appeared in the cockpits, Denki was the first to bring up the new armor. Hey, check it out. Cool. Okako gawked at the shiny golden shoji screens and the scrolls on them that had the kanji for turtle gui on them. Metal, Kyuka commented, admiring her upgraded sword. Everyone focus. Tenya shouted. The 4 plugged their swords into the podiums and moved them forward, catching up to Izuku's lion Zord. Tsuyu walked through Muzutafu, deciding on which buildings to destroy first. He stopped when he heard a shout come from behind him. Canyon Cannon. Before he could turn around, he was hit by a powerful flying kick to the back. He managed to catch himself before he fell over and then looked back at his attacker. She had a pair of purple horns on her head and was about 20 meters tall. Oh crap, he's way taller than me. The hero thought as she looked up at the monster. Ha, it seems you come in larger sizes as well, said under his breath as he approached her. No matter. He then grabbed her by the head and lifted her up. He then threw her several blocks away. As he went back to marching through the city, Tsuyu turned to see the 5 Zords charging at him. There you are, I've been waiting for you, Tsuyu said before shooting energy blasts from his swords. The lion Zord charged through and pounced at him, managing to scratch him on his side. Ah, you little. Tsuyu then began shooting a much more powerful energy blast from his shoulder eyes at the Zord. The Zord outran the stream of energy and charged back at the Nylok, only to be hit by the monster's sword and getting knocked back. We need to attack as well, Tenya shouted as the other rangers charged at the Nylok. I'll take the left. I'll take the right, Kyuka confirmed. The ape Zord jumped in and began to punch and maul Tsuyu, then jumped back and perched itself on a nearby building. My turn, Okako shouted as the turtle Zord transformed back into its emblem mode and began spinning, creating a whirlwind that flew towards the Nylok. Nice try, Tsuyu shouted as he knocked her Zord out of the air, biting down on it with his mouth on his lower half. Ah, hey, let go, Okako shouted as the Nylok's teeth grinded into the Zord. Let her go, Denki shouted as the bear Zord charged at the Nylok, getting up on its hind legs. Take this. His Zord then began furiously mauling at the monster. How's that creep? Only for its blue hands to reach down and grab it. Tsuyu picked up the bear Zord. Damn you, the Zord then transformed back into its emblem mode, slipping out of its hands and falling straight onto the Nylok's foot. Arg, my foot, Tsuyu shouted in pain, his lower eyes popping out of their sockets as his lower jaw released the turtle Zord. As the Nylok grabbed his foot in pain, the 2 Zords began making a hasty retreat. Hey, get back here you. Tuya began chasing after them, only to be hit by a superheated blast of water. I got your backs, Tenya said. The Dragon Zord then flew in and slammed its tail into the Nylok, knocking them to the ground. I'll finish this, Izuku said as he pulled out the control stick, transforming it back into its blade form before spinning the disc. Pentagonal Fury, Izuku shouted as he thrusted his blade forward. The Lion Zord transformed back into its emblem mode with the front two legs outstretched. It was then engulfed in flames and flew at Tuya, cutting right through him. The Zord then transformed back into its lion form as it landed. It then let out a victorious roar as the Nylok collapsed to the ground, exploding in a giant fireball. Samurai Rangers, victory is ours. Both civilians and heroes looked on in shock at seeing the 5 mechs side by side, victorious. Good work out there yesterday young Midoriya, that was a splendid battle. G congratulated the young teen. Thanks mentor, Izuku sheepishly said as he tightened his belt on his training GI. I didn't expect Crust or Mirako to be there though. I did some research and found that the HPSC had been stationing Japan's top 10 in and around Muzutafu. G said, showing Izuku an article on his Samuraiza. Probably to deal with the Nylok. Izuku added. That did not go well. G replied, recalling news footage that captured the heroes' battle with the Nylok. The others did well out there too, right? Izuku asked. Yes, but that won't always be the case going forward. G sighed, the only reason they lasted as long as they did was because of the symbol I casted on them. Now they're gonna need to work hard in order to gain the skills and instincts of a samurai ranger, as well as master symbol power. Then there's no time to waste. Izuku and G then walked outside to see the other 4 rangers waiting for them in the courtyard, now sporting their own training GI with their designated colors on them. G and Izuku then grabbed a couple of training swords then handed them to the new rangers. Let's begin, G said. Act 6, The Team Unites Part 2. There is more to becoming a samurai ranger than simply swinging a sword. G said as he paced back and forth. The 4 new rangers were using their samurazas to write on canvases. You must master the art of symbol power. Tenya wrote out the kanji for Splash Mo. Upon completing the character, a small burst of water hit him directly in the face. Kyuka wrote out the kanji for Rokuchi. Upon completion, the ink transformed into a small boulder that proceeded to fall on Tenya's foot while he was distracted wiping the water off his glasses. Ouch. Oh crap, I'm so sorry dude. Kyuka quickly apologized. You alright? Yep, I'm fine, Tenya said as he began hopping, trying not to put pressure on his definitely bruised foot. Okoko meanwhile, wrote out the kanji for Wind Fang. Upon its completion, a gust of wind blew her hair back. They all seem pretty skilled. Izuku commented. I'm not so sure about that, G said. His attention turned to the last new member. Come on, Denki grumbled. He had written out the kanji for Grass Cow, but nothing happened. He tried again only for it to end in the same result. What? He went to try again when he felt something hit the back of his head. Ow. First off, your stroke order is wrong, G advised, resting a training sword on his shoulder. And secondly, you need to put more emphasis into your strokes. You may need more training than I anticipated. Oh, hey wait a minute. Why did you hit me? Denki shouted, realizing that G hit him. Testing your reflexes, G said as began walking away. I'll show you reflexes, Denki said under his breath, sending out the bear folding Zord to bite G's ankle. Luckily the lion folding Zord intervened. Hey mentor Kusuke. Izuku walked over to G, making sure to try and obscure the lion and bear Zords which were growling at each other. Maybe we should switch to something he might be better at, maybe weapons training. Alright then, G said, nodding to the Kuroko who then ran to collect something. G then walked into the Shiba house. Izuku followed close behind, catching the lion folding Zord in his palm as it jumped up to him. Denki picked up the bear folding Zord before turning to see the others glaring at him. What? We saw that, Tenya yelled. That was an incredibly irresponsible use of your Zord. As G searched the archives for a specific book, Izuku approached him. Hey mentor, don't you think you're being a bit too harsh on him? Through his first week of training, young Kaminari's skills in swordsmanship alone have not improved as much compared to the others. The Nylok aren't gonna wait for all of us to be ready. G then found the book he was searching for and turned back to Izuku. I know, but couldn't you be a bit kinder to Hai? G cut Izuku off. Young Midoriya, you don't need to apologize for someone who sends their Zord to attack after getting a bit of criticism. He then walked back out to the training grounds. Each samurai ranger has a unique weapon to utilize during combat, with the Nylok as young Midoriya displayed in your battle in downtown Muzutafu. G explained. The Kuroko then returned with the training weapons. Today, you'll begin training to use them. The Netherworld. The 2 Nylok sat in the empty main room of the ship, the violent waters of the Sanzu River slamming into the ship's hull. So, with the master out of the picture, what do we do now? Dayu asked, strumming her harmonium. We continue with his plan. We send Nilop to attack the humans in order to flood the Sanzu River into the human world. Optaru replied. Well, with the samurai rangers still around, it's still gonna take a long time to flood their world. Dayu commented. On the contrary, it might be a bit easier. Optaru chuckled. In the past, whenever humans experienced pain, torment, fear or sadness, the waters of the Sanzu River rose. Optaru explained. I cannot say for certain, but a while back it began rising at a faster rate, then around 5 or so years ago, the river began rising ever faster. At the rate it's rising now, I estimate that if we send Nilop to attack them, it will only take around a year or so to flood their world. That probably means the human world has gotten a lot more interesting science the last time I've been there. Dayu glumly said. Indeed, which is why I summoned Scorponic. He rather enjoyed tormenting him back in the day, so I can't wait to see what he'll do now. The two then heard something. They both looked to see a clawed hand grab onto the ship. A feline head with exoskeleton-like plating then emerged from the side of the ship. You call, boss. An arrow flew through the air followed by several more, each hit their target, some nearly hitting theirs in the center. Excellent shot, young Iida, G congratulated. You're a very fast learner. Thank you, mentor. Tenya bowed, a bow held in his hand. Meanwhile, Okako practiced with some of the Kuroko. She waved around a fan, the Kuroko jumping back when she waved it at them. Am I really supposed to fight with this thing? It feels more like kabuki dancing than anything, she thought. Kyuka stared down some other Kuroko, a three-pronged boomerang clutched in her hand. She began using it to strike at the Kuroko and block their attacks. Kyuka then threw the boomerang through the air. The Kuroko then dodged out of the boomerang's path as it started flying back. Okay, I think I got this covered, Kyuka said as she caught the boomerang. Denki stared down Izuku. The blonde held a bow staff while the greenie was armed with a training sword. Denki taunted Izuku before running at him, thrusting his staff at him. Izuku dodged out of the way before slashing at his opponent. Denki struggled to block Izuku's attacks before suddenly having his legs swept out from under him, hitting the ground with a thud. Ah, are you okay? I didn't expect you to hit the ground that hard, Izuku asked, reaching out a hand. Nah, I'm fine, Denki said, taking Izuku's hand and getting back to his feet. Out of the corner of his eye, Denki saw G glaring at him before heading inside the building with Tenya not far behind. What's the old guy's deal? He's giving me the stink eye and it's really killing my motivation. Denki groaned. Well, you did send your Zord to bite him, Izuku replied. Cause he hit me over the head, Denki argued back, rubbing the back of his head. Don't worry, he gets nicer the more you get to know him. Izuku tried to reassure him. Denki sighed. Whatever, man, I really hope the teachers at UA aren't like him, Denki said under his breath, catching Izuku's attention. Wait, you're going to UA too? Izuku asked. Yeah, hero course, Denki confirmed. Same here, Kyuka said, Okako following behind her. Me too, I barely made the practical exam though, Okako added, remembering almost getting crushed by the zero-pointer. Actually, now that I think about it, I think I saw Iida there too. I wonder if he got in. What about you, dude? Kyuka asked. General studies, Izuku sheepishly replied. There was a moment of silence before Denki spoke up. Oh, well, that's still kinda cool. I mean, it's not the hero course, but it's still cool. Yeah, you got into one of the top schools in the country. That's still something to be proud about, Okako encouraged. Meanwhile, inside the Shiba house, she headed to the archives to prepare for the rest of the day's training, while Tenya sat in the main room to get a quick drink of water. As he put his water bottle back, he noticed a book G had left out. The pages open displayed the 5 animals their Zords represented, as well as a large samurai warrior standing behind them. Tenya began reading the text and discovered what the warrior was called. Megazord. The Samurai Megazord, a combination of all of your Zords, G clarified as he walked over. Just like the Samurai Rangers, each Zord is powerful on their own, but together you are unstoppable. After grabbing what he needed, the two walked back outside to see the 4 other Rangers talking to each other. Hey Iida, Denki shouted as he saw him exit the building. After training, we're gonna go get some Odin. You wanna join us all? The alarm began blaring from inside. She immediately ran back inside and straight to the main room, pulling up the map just as the Rangers arrived. City Hall. She then pulled out his samuraiza and wrote the kanji for gate meant, creating a portal for the Rangers. Izuku then pulled out his samuraiza and turned to the others. Let's go. City Hall. Scorponic and his entourage of Mugas marched through Musutafu, attacking any and all humans that crossed their path. No, don't kill them all at once, Scorponic shouted at one of the Mugas. Pace yourselves, it will cause the Sanzu River to rise more, and it's more fun that way. A small red blur flew at Scorponic. The Nilop managed to block it with his sword. That's far enough, Nylok. Scorponic looked to see the samurai rangers, accompanied by the Kuroko. The five unsheathed their swords and got into battle poses. Rangers together, samurai forever. The Nylok glared at the multicolored annoyances before thrusting his sword in their direction. Get them, Scorponic growled before walking away, the Mugas changing in at the Rangers. The Rangers ran at the Mugas, now a bit more prepared. Izuku slashed at two Mugas before blocking an attack from another, then he swept its legs and slashed at it while it was down. He then ran to Scorponic, equipping his Fire Smasher to clear a path. Tenya meanwhile made his way onto a balcony, slashing at several Mugas as he made his way forward. He then spun the black spin disc on his sword, transforming it into a blue bow with the kanji for water Shui on the front. Hydro bow. He attached the dragon water spin disc before jumping from the balcony and firing several water arrows at a crowd of Mugas down below. He then turned back to fire at the remaining Mugas on the balcony. Kyuka spun her black spin disc, transforming her sword into a large shuriken with the kanji for soil 2 on it. Earth Slicer. She then attached the Ape Earth disc onto it before blocking a Muga's attack. She then began slashing at it and a couple others before throwing it into the air. It then began circling around her, cutting down several Mugas before being caught by Kyuka. Denki spun his disc, transforming his sword into a long staff with the kanji for tree mu on the end of it. Forest Spear. He then pulled out the bare forest disc and attached it, a blade popping out of the top of the kanji. Hey, you guys mind if I take you for a spin? He shouted before spinning the spear around, knocking down the several Mugas that surrounded him. Hey humans, Scorponic shouted as he marched down an abandoned street. Come out wherever you are. He then saw something out of the corner of his eye. He turned to see something bright falling from the sky. What the? It then crashed down in front of him, creating a massive crater. I hoped another one of you would show up. A voice came from the crater. Out of the smoke walked a man completely engulfed in flames. Since that other monster showed up downtown, I was hoping I got a chance to incinerate one of you creeps. He then rushed at Scorponic, launching several fiery punches at the monster. Scorponic did his best to dodge the attacks but was still hit by some of them. He then jumped back as the man began forming a long spire of fire in his hand. Ignited arrow. He shouted, launching the arrow straight into the monster's shoulder. Ah, you're pretty tough. Scorponic growled, clutching his shoulder. He then began swaying back and forth, a tendril of purple energy slowly forming around him. Whirlwind Scorpion Slash. Scorponic then launched the tendril at the man, knocking him through the air into several buildings. Impressive. If he kept going, he might have dried me out, thought as he took note of his injuries. He then turned to see Izuku charging at him. He barely managed to block the incoming attack. Nearby, Okako was dealing with a group of Mugas, blocking an attack before striking back. She then spun the black spin disc, transforming her sword into a fan with the kanji for Heaven Tian on it. Heaven Fan. She attached the turtle sky spin disc before slashing at the Mugas. She then began waving the fan around, creating powerful gusts of wind that knocked the surrounding Mugas down. Wow, I was wrong about this thing. She then launched an attack at the remaining Mugas, launching a massive gust of wind down the street that knocked Izuku off balance. Thanks for the distraction, Scorponic shouted before slamming his sword into Izuku, slamming him into a nearby building. After a moment he fell to the ground with a thud. Ah, Midoriya. Okako ran to her injured teammate, the other rangers not far behind. Let's finish this, Scorponic shouted, swaying back and forth, the purple energy tendril reforming. Whirlwind Scorpion Slash. He launched his attack at the rangers, a massive fireball erupting when it hit, resulting in the rangers lying in a massive crater, smoke emanating from their suits. Can't any of you stand? Ha, bunch of weaklings. Scorponic growled before walking off. Hey, are you guys alright? Izuku spoke up, lifting himself up. Kyuka got to her knees before turning to Okako who had taken the brunt of the attack. Uraraka. She shouted, crawling to her teammate's side. We need to retreat and form a new plan of attack. Tenya said as he got to his feet. The others nodded in agreement except Izuku, who got up and began walking to his sword. Hey, where are you going? Denki asked. Are you gonna try and fight him again? Kyuko asked, holding an injured Okako over her shoulder. As Izuku went to grab his sword, Tenya walked up behind him. Aren't you injured? He asked, grabbing Izuku's shoulder. Izuku immediately flinched in pain. Yeah, he said, retrieving his sword before running at Scorponic. The others looked on, wide-eyed. He's still attacking. Does he really think he can handle this guy all on his? Denki was cut off by Okako. No, look. Okako noticed what Izuku saw. Izuku swung his sword at Scorponic. The Nylok managed to block the attack but then Izuku spun around and slashed its back. He then reached into the surrounding rubble to retrieve a kid. Kyuka and the others finally saw what Izuku saw. It was a young girl around 5 or 6 with green hair and frog-like features. Okako managed to get to her feet on her own. He saw her and didn't hesitate. Scorponic threw several more attacks at them, but Izuku managed to either dodge or block them. He then slashed at Scorponic before then thrusting his sword at him, knocking the Nylok back. Satsuki. Izuku turned to see an older girl at the end of the street. She was around his age and also had frog-like features. Big sis Sue. The girl shouted. Izuku then immediately rushed over to reunite the sisters before turning around to continue battling Scorponic. He's able to stay focused, even when he's hurt, Tenya said, stepping forward as he watched the battle rage on. Denki limped forward. What's UA's Modo, plus Ultra? Well, seems like is the definition of it. Kyuka then spoke up. Well then, what the hell are we waiting for? She turned to nod at her teammates who in turn nodded back. They then retrieved their swords before returning to the battle. Scorponic recovered from an attack from Izuku. He then began swaying back and forth. Whirlwind Scorpion. Just as the tendril was about to hit Izuku, the other rangers jumped in, cutting through the tendril and knocking the Nylok back. Ah. What's the plan? Kyuko asked as she and the others ran to Izuku's side. We launch a combined attack, Izuku said, attaching the Lion Fire spin disc to his spin sword. Right, Tenya nodded. He and Kyuka attached their respective spin discs to their swords. Got it. Okako followed suit. She and Denki attached their spin discs to their swords. They then spun their discs. Each of their swords were then engulfed by their respective elements. Quintuple slash. They then charged at Scorponic. First Izuku struck him, then Tenya, then Okako, then Denki and finally Kyuka. The five then struck victory poses as Scorponic collapsed behind them, before erupting in a fiery explosion. Stay focused guys, the battle's not over, Izuku reminded the others. The rangers turned back to see the Tower Inferno that then faded to reveal Scorponic's giant form. I'm not finished yet rangers. The rangers quickly reacted, using their symbol power to enlarge their Zords before charging at the Nylok. As they approached, Scorponic sent a cloud of smoke and rubble at them, engulfing their Zords. How are we supposed to fight in all this? Denki asked. Our Zords alone aren't enough, Izuku said. We need to get a better view. We need the Samurai Megazord. Tenya spoke up. The what? The other three rangers asked in unison. It's a combination of our Zords. With it we'll be able to beat him, Tenya explained. Well, what are we waiting for? Denki asked. Let's do it. Let's kick this guy's ass, Kyuka shouted, slamming her fists together. Yeah, Okako agreed. Follow my lead, Zords combine, Tenya shouted, thrusting his control stick forward. Four of the Zords charged forward, returning to their emblem modes before beginning the combination. The Bear Zord formed the combination's base, then the Dragon Zord took its place on top, followed by the Turtle Zord. Finally the Ape Zord took its place at the very top. Samurai Megazord. We are. Ariita, what the hell is this? Kyuko asked. Tenya then realized that instead of forming the samurai warrior seen in G's book, it instead was a giant tower that kind of resembled. Oh, we're a giant Odin, Okako realized. Iida probably had it on his mind from earlier. What the? Scorponic questioned the strange tower. Ariita, what's going on? Izuku asked. The Lion Zord roared at the Odin tower. Hey, why am I on the bottom? Denki shouted. The Bear Zord began shaking, throwing the tower off balance. Hey, just a bluff, Scorponic shouted, knocking the Bear Zord out from under the other Zords, causing them all to collapse to the ground. Let's try this again, Izuku said, pulling out his Samurazer and writing the kanji for combine he. Zords combine. The Lion Zord's legs folded up before the Lion's front half folded forwards, two panels folded up to form a head. The Turtle Zord's head and fins folded away before the Zord unfolded to form the right arm, while the Ape Zord's arms folded up to form the left. A small black piece of the Dragon Zord detached while the rest of it folded up to form the left leg, while the Bear Zord's legs folded up to form the right leg, the animal's heads forming the feet. The Zords then all joined together. Finally, a golden crest folded out of the remaining piece of the Dragon Zord, revealing it to be the helmet. The Megazord dawned as a katana materialized at its side. The Rangers then appeared in the Megazord's cockpit, which had scrolls displaying the Shiba family crest. Samurai Megazord. We are united. Yeah, now that's what I'm talking about, Denki cheered. Yeah, Okako added, high-fiving her green teammate. My apologies, Tenya apologized. Don't sweat it dude, Kyuka reassured him. Get ready, here he comes. Izuku alerted the others, the Megazord drawing its swords as Scorponic charged at them. The Megazord blocked the Nylok's first attack before dodging its second attack. It then ducked under the Nylok's third attack that ripped through the building behind them. The Megazord then spun around and slashed at Scorponic, knocking him down and accidentally splitting the building behind him in two. And down he goes, Kyuka cheered. I hope those buildings were insured. Tenya rubbed the back of his neck at the massive collateral damage caused. Scorponic slowly got back to his feet. Giant Mugas, come forth. Scorponic roared. Giant Mugas slowly began making their way through the gaps between buildings. You gotta be kidding me, these guys come giant-sized too. Denki yelled as they were suddenly surrounded. The Mugas then swarmed the Megazord. The Rangers tried their best to fight them off, but they were ultimately overwhelmed. Some of the Mugas began throwing chains at them, immobilizing the Megazord. They then began striking the Megazord with spears. Gah! What do we do now? Okako began panicking. Roaring Inferno! Izuku shouted as he moved his control stick forward. A massive burst of flames erupted from the lion's mouth, catching several of the Mugas on fire. The Megazord then hoisted the Mugas, restraining it into the air by their chains, knocking them into each other. Destroy them! Scorponic shouted, sending more Mugas to attack. The Megazord merely walked through them, cutting them down as it made its way to Scorponic. The Megazord then pointed its sword at Scorponic. Let's finish this, Izuku said as he pulled his blade from the podium. The other Rangers followed suit. Katana power! They shouted, spinning their spin discs for the attack. The Megazord's sword began glowing as symbol power began building up in it. The Megazord then got into an attack stance. Samurai strike! Zan! The Megazord swung its sword, cutting right through Scorponic. The Nihilop staggered for a moment before collapsing, then erupting into a final fiery explosion as the Megazord struck a victory pose. Civilians and pro-heroes emerged from the emergency shelters to see the Grand Samurai Megazord standing there victorious. Meanwhile, on the top of a nearby building, Endeavor stood wide-eyed and speechless at the sight. The Megazord then went to resheath its sword. Samurai Rangers, victory is ours, Izuku said, the Megazord striking a final pose before being engulfed by a massive cloud of smoke, then disappearing. The HPSC president sat in her office, stressed out of her mind. Things are getting out of hand. First there were 5 of them, now this. She thought to herself. The door to her office then opened, revealing the winged number 3 hero. Hey boss, the principal of UA High is here for his meeting, Hawks informed her. The HPSC president nodded, and after a moment, a small dog, mouse, bear, but more importantly, the principal of UA walked through the door and sat across from her. Good evening, Madam President. Good evening, Nezu. It's always a pleasure. The HPSC greeted Nezu with a handshake. So, I assume you want to waste no time in this meeting, so should we first address the elephant in the room? I'd rather address the monsters destroying our city, Nezu bluntly responded. The HPSC president sighed, rubbing her temples. I'm still struggling to wrap my head around this. First there were more samurai rangers, then these different monsters that could turn into giants started showing up, and now there are giant combining robots. Those mecha that are much more advanced than anything UA has, so whoever these guys are, they aren't run-of-the-mill vigilantes, Nezu commented. Not to mention the social media response. The HPSC president was about to begin another tangent before Nezu stopped her. Actually, I mainly wanted to discuss those monsters that began appearing. I believe something is coming, Nezu said before pulling out a chessboard. Reports from the 2 monster attacks claimed that the massive amounts of Mugas followed the monsters' orders, so it appears that the Mugas are just the foot soldiers, Nezu said, placing down the pawns on one side of the board. Secondly, it's my guess that the Muga attacks prior to this were orchestrated by someone or something wherever they come from, and that these new monster attacks are their doing, so there will likely be more of them to come as well. Nezu then placed down the rooks, knights and bishops behind the pawns. Then there's whoever is leading them, it's likely they are the strongest of them all, Nezu said before placing the king and queen down, completing the new threat side. So where does that leave us? The HPSC president asked. Nezu nodded before placing the pawns on the opposite side. First, there are the majority of pro-heroes out there. With the information we have now, they might stand a better chance against them. He then placed the rooks. Then we have the top 10, the ones that might have a chance against the new monsters, though not much of a chance. Nezu then placed down the king. Finally, there's All Might, our strongest piece, though I'm not even sure if he stands a chance against whoever is leading them. The HPSC president's eyes widened. So you're saying that we're sitting ducks then? After a moment, Nezu continued. Not so fast, I haven't laid down all our pieces yet, he said, placing down the rooks and knights, each of them having the kanji of one of the new samurai rangers on them. He then placed the queen, which had the kanji fire, Huo, on it. The HPSC president blinked at this before looking up at Nezu. Like it or not, the samurai rangers are our unofficial allies. We're out of our league here, so our best option is to focus on evacuation efforts while the samurai rangers deal with the monsters. Nezu explained his stance. After a long stretch of silence, the HPSC president responded. Maybe you're. She was then startled by a sudden beeping. Sorry about that, it seems I'm needed back at UA, Nezu said, turning the alert on his phone off. In a few weeks I'm gonna have a New Year's worth of students roaming the halls and there is still so much paperwork to be done, so I guess for now it's meeting adjourned. Have a lovely rest of your day, Madam President, he said before exiting the room, leaving the fully stocked chessboard behind. The HPSC president stared at the board for a bit before reaching for one of the pieces. She picked up the queen with the kanji for fire on it and began staring at it in thought. ... Yo, guys, it's me, the professor, and sorry for taking so long to upload Samurai Forever, in like a month. So do me a favor and do whatever you can to like, subscribe and share the video with your friends.